I never imagined that life could change so cruelly in a single moment, as if someone had suddenly tugged on a cord, severing all the threads that once connected me to my past, with no hope of restoration. My time in the U.S. Army left deep scars and countless unforgettable moments in me, both joyful and tragic. I had always believed that true love was the anchor that kept one afloat even in the fiercest storms. And I was convinced that my girlfriend, Lana, was that very anchor in my life. But upon returning home after long months of service abroad, I was confronted with a reality that turned everything upside down and forced me to reconsider everything I once held to be true. When I stepped back onto my native soil, my heart was filled with the anticipation of a reunion, a joyful expectation of that long-awaited embrace that could heal all the wounds of war. I dreamed of returning into her warm arms, of inhaling the familiar scent of her perfume, a fragrance that symbolized hope and comfort. But everything turned out to be different from what I had imagined. From the very first days after my return, I began noticing oddities. Lana started avoiding conversations about the future, refusing to discuss our plans. Her responses grew increasingly distant and cold, as if an invisible, insurmountable barrier had sprung up between us. My first feeling of dread took hold when I saw her phone lying on the table, not turned off on the nightstand as it usually was. Lana typically kept it close, for her phone wasn't just a device for communication. It was a vital connection to the world we were building together. But now, as I observed her like a stranger, something was off. My suspicions grew when I heard a voice that wasn't hers emanating from the speaker during one of her calls. I refrained from asking too many questions. The inner voice advised me to wait for the right moment. As days went by, the warning signs grew ever more vivid. Lana began spending more time outside the home, ostensibly occupied with work-related matters. I knew how important her career was to her, and she had always managed to balance work with our personal life so that we both felt needed by one another. But now something had changed. The calls she received seemed too frequent, and her answers grew evasive. I tried to rationalize it, convincing myself that maybe she was simply busy, that the time spent in service had left an inner void she was attempting to fill with new acquaintances. One misty pre-dawn morning, I happened to encounter a neighbor who mentioned that Lana was often seen leaving the apartment just before sunrise, always in a hurry and with clear signs of unease in her eyes. These quiet words, like whispers of the wind, made me doubt that I truly knew her all my life. Gradually, my apprehension transformed into a painful realization. The woman I loved, for whom I was ready to give my life, might not be who I thought she was. Memories of our first meetings, our laughter under the stars, and endless conversations suddenly began to seem like an illusion, crafted to conceal the truth. My heart pounded wildly as I started to piece together a mosaic of details. Deleted messages on her phone, strange meetings she'd kept secret, sudden changes in her behavior. Each new detail was like a drop of poison seeping into my consciousness, dismantling the certainty that we had once been united in happiness and love. I felt doubts building inside me, as if an invisible hand was gradually squeezing my heart, robbing it of any capacity for joy. One evening, sitting alone in a dark room, where only the soft glow of streetlights seeped through the curtains, I finally mustered the courage to ask her the questions that had long haunted me. But, as it turned out, answers never come easily. Lana responded evasively, her silence and avoidance leaving me unsettled, as if she feared that the truth would shatter her carefully constructed world. I could feel a chill creeping into my very soul. My words, laden with pain and despair, echoed in the empty room that once resounded with the laughter and joy of our shared moments. Looking back, I realized that during my time of service, I was ready to sacrifice my life for my country, without a thought for the betrayal that awaited me at home. The service changed me. It taught me how to survive in a harsh world, but it seemed it could never have prepared me for the revelation that my closest and dearest partner could be as fickle and cold as the winter frost. It was in that moment, when you desperately cling to the hope of light, that darkness suddenly descends, leaving you face to face with your own demons. I began searching for answers, trying to recall every minute detail of our conversations, every moment when her eyes sparkled with a unique light, and those when that light had dimmed, leaving behind the cold sting of loss. Every trivial detail now appeared as a signal, pointing toward the truth I had long tried to ignore. The sting of betrayal seeped into every cell of my being, leaving scars that no amount of water could wash away. The sense of betrayal made me feel deceived, not only as a lover, but also as a soldier who had given so much for peace, only to receive emptiness and disillusionment in return. Occasionally, when I sought solace in old photographs, letters, and memories, I found that behind each captured moment lay a lie, and behind every tender word hid a bitter truth. These relics of the past, once filled with hope and love, now appeared to me as mere phantoms of bygone illusions. I knew that I would never be able to trust anyone as I had trusted Lana, for betrayal leaves a mark that can never be erased. One morning, waking in a cold sweat from nightmares, blending images of our happy days with horrifying visions of her infidelity, I finally realized everything I had known was an illusion. That moment, when you understand that the one you loved has not only left you physically, but emotionally as well, leaving behind only fragments of memories, can be the most agonizing of all. I tried to believe that I could forgive her, that I could forget, but every new day only brought fresh wounds and unanswered questions. Thus began my journey, a journey filled with inner searches and agonizing self-reflection, a journey in which I struggled to find the strength to carry on, despite the relentless betrayal. With each passing day, I came to understand that reality is far more complex than any imagination. Sometimes, love can transform into a lie, and loyalty can become treachery. And although I did not know if I would ever forget the pain, I understood one thing: life goes on, and perhaps, just beyond the horizon, a new dawn was already flickering, promising hope for a better future. This part of my story is only the beginning of a long journey, a journey during which I will learn to accept the past and find the strength to move forward, no matter what. May this story sound like an echo of days gone by, a soft murmur of pain and loss, but it is also full of determination, inner strength, and faith, that even after the deepest wound, one can find light. And even though I now stand at a crossroads, torn between memories of past happiness and the inevitable pain of betrayal, I know that every new chapter of my life will be filled with sincerity and true feelings that cannot be stolen by lies. The nighttime streets of my hometown now appeared to me as unfamiliar labyrinths, where every shadow concealed memories of the past and every passerby could be a reflection of someone I once loved. After the first blow of betrayal, after realizing that my life had changed in an instant, I found myself trapped between the past and the future, between the agony of loss and an insatiable thirst for answers. The second stage of my journey began in the hours when the city had already sunk into a deep night, and I, like a lost traveler, sought solace in endless reflections and recollections. Days passed since that fateful evening when Lana's words, spoken with such cold detachment, echoed in my heart. I could no longer see the world with the same eyes, for every familiar place reminded me of her smile, every sound of her voice. I tried to reclaim my former confidence, but thoughts of her haunted me, like a shadow that wouldn't leave me in either the light of day or the depths of night. Every minute, I searched for explanations for her behavior, dissecting every phrase, every glance, trying to understand where the crack had formed that allowed her to slip into someone else's arms. These questions tormented me, forcing me to reevaluate every moment we had shared, from the happiest to the most painful. Left alone with my thoughts, I began to feel an icy indifference growing within me, as though every memory of us transformed into a cold blade slicing through the delicate boundary between love and hatred. It seemed to me that time had frozen in that moment when I first noticed the changes in her behavior. But the more I tried to grasp the essence of what was happening, the clearer it became. My past with Lana was merely a facade, concealing a deep wound. That wound was so vast and painful that I began to doubt whether I could ever restore the trust and love I once knew. In every moment of her silence, I heard echoes of infidelity, in every distant look, a reminder that all we had built together was nothing more than a fragile construct, liable to collapse at the slightest provocation. wandering through the deserted streets, I sought solace in the melancholy of the night. The light of street lamps, reflected in puddles after a recent rain, seemed to symbolize the fleeting glimmer of hope that so quickly faded under the onslaught of reality. I would enter small cafes where the people, absorbed in their own worlds, offered me only a distant connection to the surroundings. But every encounter, every face, reminded me of how utterly alone I had become after the betrayal. People around me continued to live, laugh, and love, unaware of how deeply the bitterness of loss was consuming me. In those moments I asked myself, why did fate choose me for such an ordeal? Why, in my case, was it so cruel when one who had given everything for peace ended up alone with a pain that no solace could quell? In those sleepless nights, I found comfort in old letters, photographs, and even the faint melodies that once played when Lana and I were together. Every handwritten line of her notes now resonated as an echo of a bygone era when our love was invincible, beyond the reach of any storm or doubt. But in these memories, I also discovered evidence that nothing was as it seemed. In every letter, in every word, there was a hint of her growing detachment, of an abyss that was slowly being filled with someone else's feelings and other words. With each reading, I felt my soul sinking deeper into the abyss of the past, a past from which there was no escape, no matter how strong my will to resist. Then one day, sitting in the old room whose walls once held our happy moments, I suddenly realized that I could no longer live in the captivity of illusions. Every corner of that house, every trifle, evoked painful associations with Lana, her tender words and deceitful caresses. Yet at the same time, I understood that it was time to find the strength within me to let go of the past and take a step toward the future, no matter how arduous it seemed. The fear of the unknown paralyzed me, but the pain of betrayal had long transformed into something more than just a wound. It had become an inseparable part of me, a part that could not be ignored, though perhaps it could be accepted. From morning until evening, I spent hours lost in endless thoughts, writing down everything that crossed my mind, as if trying to piece together the shattered mosaic of my inner world. I chronicled each day when Lana failed to answer my calls, each empty glance she shot as I attempted to reconnect. Sometimes I wondered if I was being too harsh on myself in my analysis, yet the answers came only in the form of new memories. New pieces of evidence that all I had believed to be real was nothing but a mirage. In the process of these writings, I began to understand that betrayal is not merely a breach of loyalty. It is a collision of worlds where one person is broken, while the other is freed from obligations. Lana, perhaps, had been searching for something more than our shared history could offer, and I, mired in old patterns of belief, failed to discern her true aspirations. I came to realize that she was not the monolith I had imagined, but a human being with her own fears, desires, and perhaps secrets of which I had never been aware. These thoughts troubled me, forcing me to ponder where the line between love and self-sacrifice lay, between loyalty and oblivion. There came a rainy evening when the sound of droplets tapping against the windows created a melancholic rhythm of sorrow and longing, and I decided once again to write her a letter in which I tried to lay bare all my feelings, doubts, and pain. The words poured forth from my pen, transforming into confessions I was too afraid to voice in person. That letter became for me a symbol of one final attempt to rebuild a bridge between the past and the present. A desperate bid either to reclaim what was lost or to bid a final farewell to the illusion that love could be eternal. Yet, sending the letter proved more difficult than I had imagined. The fear of definitive rejection, of confirming that all I had poured into those lines was nothing but a dream, a parallel reality with no place for deceit and betrayal. I often reread what I had written, searching for comfort and answers in the words, but each reading only spawned new questions and doubts. Perhaps it was a farewell to the past, to the time when love was pure and innocent, when there was no place for lies or infidelity. Now, faced with harsh reality, I realized that every word, every sentence in that letter was a cry of the soul, a cry for help that most likely would go unanswered. This realization brought with it a strange sense of freedom. The freedom to admit that what was lost could never be recovered, that the past would forever remain a memory, and that the future had to be rebuilt brick by brick, without promises and illusions. Thus began my path. A path filled with inner searches and agonizing self-analysis. A path on which I strove to find within myself the strength to continue living despite the merciless betrayal. With every passing day, I increasingly understood that reality is more complex than any imagination, that sometimes love turns into deceit and loyalty transforms into betrayal. And though I did not know if I could ever forget the pain, I knew one thing for certain: life goes on, and perhaps somewhere beyond the horizon, a new dawn was already shimmering, offering hope for a brighter future. This part of my story is only the beginning of a long journey, a journey during which I will learn to accept the past and summon the strength to move forward, no matter what. May this story resonate as an echo of days gone by, a soft whisper of pain and loss, but also as a tale filled with determination, inner strength, and the belief that even after the deepest wound, there is light to be found. The nighttime streets of my hometown began to appear to me as unfamiliar labyrinths, where every shadow concealed memories of the past, and every passerby might reflect someone I once loved. After the initial shock of betrayal, after realizing that my life had changed in an instant, I found myself at a crossroads, caught between the past and the future, between the pain of loss and an unquenchable desire for answers. The second phase of my journey commenced during the hours when the city had sunk into a profound night, and I, like a lost traveler, sought comfort in endless musings and memories. A few days had passed since that fateful evening, when Lana's words, spoken with such cold detachment, echoed in my heart. I could no longer view the world with the same eyes, for every familiar place reminded me of her smile, every sound of her voice. I tried to reclaim the confidence I once had, yet thoughts of her haunted me, like a shadow that refused to let go in the light of day or the depths of night. Every minute, I sought explanations for her behavior, analyzing each phrase and every glance, trying to pinpoint where that subtle crack had emerged that allowed her to slip into another's arms. These questions tormented me, making me revisit every moment, from the happiest to the most agonizing that we had shared. Alone with my thoughts, I began to feel an icy numbness creeping in, as if every memory of us turned into a cold blade slicing through the fragile boundary between love and hatred. It seemed as though time had frozen in that moment when I first detected the changes in her behavior. Yet the more I tried to dig into the truth of what was happening, the clearer it became. My past with Lana was nothing but a mask, concealing a deep wound. That wound was so wide and painful that I began to doubt whether I could ever trust anyone as I once trusted Lana. In every silence from her, I heard echoes of betrayal. In every distant glance, a reminder that everything we had built was merely a fragile construct that could collapse with the slightest touch. Wandering the empty streets, I sought comfort in the melancholy of the night. The glow of streetlights, reflected in puddles after a recent rain, seemed to symbolize a transient glimmer of hope, one that quickly faded under the weight of reality. I would enter small cafes, where people immersed in their own worlds offered only a remote connection to life, and I sought some form of contact with the surrounding world. Yet every encounter, every face, reminded me of the loneliness that had consumed me after the betrayal. The people around continued living, laughing, loving, unaware of the deep sorrow that was eroding me. In those moments I wondered, why did fate choose me for such an ordeal? Why, after giving everything for my country, was I left alone with a pain that no comfort could silence? In those sleepless nights, I found solace in old letters, photographs, and even in the soft strains of melodies that once played when Lana and I were together. Every handwritten note now echoed the memories of a time when our love seemed invincible, untouched by storms or doubts. Yet in these recollections, I also discovered evidence that nothing was as it appeared. In every letter, in every word, lay hints of her growing detachment, a silent chasm slowly being filled with foreign emotions and other words. With each reading, I felt my soul sinking deeper into the abyss of the past, a chasm that could not be bridged, no matter how strong my resolve. Then one day, while sitting in the old room whose walls once bore witness to our happy times, I suddenly realized that I could no longer live imprisoned by illusions. Every corner of that house, every trivial object, evoked painful memories of Lana, of her tender words and deceitful caresses. At the same time, I understood that it was time to find the strength within myself to let go of the past and take a step toward the future, however arduous that step might be. The fear of the unknown gripped me, yet the pain of betrayal had long ceased to be merely a wound. It had become an inseparable part of me, one that could not be ignored, though perhaps it could be accepted. From morning until night, I spent countless hours in deep reflection, writing down every thought as if trying to piece together the shattered mosaic of my inner world. I chronicled each day when Lana ignored my calls, each vacant look she offered when I tried to connect. Sometimes I wondered if I was being too harsh on myself in my introspection. Yet the answers only emerged as new memories. Fresh evidence that everything I had believed in was nothing but a delicate structure, liable to crumble at the slightest pressure. In the process of these writings, I began to understand that betrayal is not simply a breach of loyalty. It is a collision of worlds where one person is shattered while the other is liberated from expectations and obligations. Perhaps Lana was seeking in our relationship something far greater than what our shared history could provide. And I, ensnared in the patterns of my old convictions, failed to see her true aspirations. I realized that she was not the monolith I had imagined, but a person with her own fears, desires, and perhaps secrets, of which I was completely unaware. These thoughts haunted me, forcing me to ponder where the line lay between love and self-sacrifice, between loyalty and oblivion. One rainy evening, as the droplets drummed on the windows, creating a rhythm of sorrow and longing, I resolved once again to write her a letter in which I attempted to convey all my feelings, doubts, and pain. The words flowed from my pen, transforming into confessions I dared not voice in person. That letter became a symbol for me, a final attempt to rebuild the bridge between past and present, an effort to reclaim what had been lost, or perhaps a final farewell to the illusion that love could be everlasting. Yet sending the letter proved more challenging than I had imagined. Fear of final rejection, of confirming that all I had poured into those lines was nothing more than a dream, a parallel reality where there was no place for deceit and betrayal. I read my words over and over, searching for comfort and answers, but every reading only spawned more questions and uncertainties. Perhaps it was a farewell to the past, a farewell to a time when love was pure and unblemished, when there was no space for lies or infidelity. Now, facing the harsh reality, I understood that every word, every sentence in that letter was a cry from my soul, a plea for help that would likely go unanswered. That realization granted me a peculiar freedom, the freedom to accept that what was lost could never be restored, that the past would forever remain a memory, and that the future must be built anew, brick by brick, without promises or illusions. Thus began my journey. A journey marked by inner exploration and agonizing self-analysis, a journey during which I sought within myself the strength to continue living despite the merciless betrayal. With every passing day, I increasingly understood that reality is more complex than any mere fantasy, that sometimes love can transform into deceit and loyalty into betrayal. And although I did not know if I would ever forget the pain, I knew one thing for certain. Life goes on, and perhaps, somewhere beyond the horizon, a new dawn was already glimmering, offering hope for a brighter future. This part of my story is only the beginning of a long journey. A journey during which I will learn to accept the past and discover within myself the strength to move forward, regardless of the obstacles. May this story resonate as an echo of days gone by, a soft murmur of pain and loss, but it is also imbued with determination, inner strength, and the belief that even after the deepest wound, one can find light. The fifth part of my journey unfolded during moments when the world around me no longer seemed as hostile and unforgiving as before. Yet within me the storm of unresolved feelings and inner conflicts still raged. In those days I awoke with the sensation that the past still clung to me like a shadow, refusing to let go of old resentments, pain, and loss. But now, with a newfound resolve to search within myself for answers, to overcome my fears, and to open up to the opportunities life might bring. In the early hours, when the city was still asleep, I would often wander the deserted streets, allowing the cool embrace of dawn to envelop my weary thoughts. Each such walk was like a quiet conversation with myself, where thoughts of Lana, of betrayal, and of how everything had fallen apart gradually merged with the hope that wounds can be healed and the heart can learn to love once more. It was in these moments, before the world fully awoke, that I sensed the weight of the past slowly diminishing, replaced by delicate glimmers of new understanding and acceptance. I began to notice that every little detail around me, from the twinkling lights of street lamps to the fresh aroma of morning coffee, became a symbol of rebirth. Strolling along the quiet streets, I felt that nature itself was telling its story of cyclical renewal. How the winter frost gives way to the warmth of spring, and how even the harshest of winters eventually yield to the vitality of life. These observations made me think that perhaps my own soul, ravaged by betrayal, could weather its winter and someday bloom again like the first spring flowers breaking through the ice. My inner dialogues became an essential part of my existence. Every evening, returning to my modest home, I would sit down at my table and carefully record all the thoughts that had accumulated in my soul throughout the day. These entries were filled with conflicting emotions, anger and disappointment, pain and tender sadness, yet also genuine hope for a better future. It seemed that each line, every word, was like a small brick helping to rebuild the foundation of myself. In these writings, I tried to understand how to forgive, not only Lana, but also myself. For those moments when I allowed my feelings to be blinded by illusions, when I failed to notice how the thin line between love and self-deception was gradually fading. As time passed, I began to realize that betrayal is not something that defines the end of love. Rather, it is a phase that can be transformed into a stepping stone for personal growth. I started to let go of old grievances, learning that forgiveness is not a gift for the other person, but one I grant myself, to shed the weight that hinders me from moving forward. In every meeting, every conversation, I saw an opportunity for a new beginning, to rediscover that tenderness and sincerity that once seemed unattainable. Among all the changes that took place within me, I realized that true renewal begins with inner freedom. That freedom allowed me to face my fears, accept them as part of my experience, and transform them into fuel for personal growth. Though the path to this liberation was long and fraught with difficulties, I understood that only by overcoming the pain could I be reborn, stronger, wiser, and open once again to the possibility of authentic love. The fifth part of my story became the time when I finally accepted that the past cannot be changed, only reinterpreted, extracting lessons for the future. I began to release old resentments, learning to forgive not for the sake of the other person but for myself, so as not to carry the heavy burden that hindered my progress. In every encounter, every conversation, I saw the chance for a new life, a possibility to rediscover that tenderness and honesty that once seemed so elusive. Amid all these transformations, I came to understand that true renewal starts from within. That inner freedom allowed me to face my fears, accept them as part of my experience, and harness them as a source of strength and wisdom. And although the road ahead was still lined with challenges, I was no longer afraid to confront them, for I had discovered that every hardship could become the foundation for something beautiful, a path to loving again, wiser and truer than before. The sixth part of my journey marked a turning point when I finally realized that the emotional scars left by betrayal were beginning to heal, transforming into something more than mere wounds. They were becoming a source of strength that allowed me to look toward the future with renewed hope and determination. It was a time when everything that once seemed hopeless acquired a new meaning, and each day confirmed that even the deepest wounds can eventually serve as lessons that harden the spirit. I awoke early, as the city slowly stirred from its slumber, and in the quiet of dawn, I sensed my thoughts aligning in new patterns, old pains giving way to fresh understanding of who I was becoming. In those moments, I revisited the inner space I had discovered during earlier stages of my journey, and I understood that all the trials of recent months had led me to a point where I must accept the inevitability of change. I would gaze at the windows of my home, frosted over with ice, and see in them a reflection of my inner world, a complex, contradictory space that was gradually being cleansed of the dust of grievances and disappointments. One of the most significant revelations of this period was the understanding that the past must not dictate our future. I began to pay more attention to myself, my body and soul, trying to grasp that in all the countless little moments, whether in the smile of a stranger, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, or the gentle rustle of leaves outside the window, there lay the strength to provide me with new energy for moving forward. One day, while walking in the park, I stopped by a small pond where the water, reflecting the first rays of the rising sun, appeared as a mirror, in which one could see not only one's pain, but also the faint promise of new life. These images reminded me that even if the past left deep marks, it could not prevent the rebirth of an inner light if we only learned to look at it differently. Encounters with people became an unexpected source of support and inspiration. I began attending gatherings where individuals shared their stories of overcoming hardship, and in listening to them, I felt the barriers of loneliness gradually recede, as understanding and solidarity seeped into my heart. These shared experiences were like a beacon at the end of a tunnel, guiding me toward restoring my faith in both humanity and my own future. In the eyes of these strangers, I saw reflections of my own hopes, and that gave me the courage to believe that despite every trial, there would always be room for love and sincere relationships. Every morning, I woke up with the thought that today was a chance for a new experience, a new encounter, a new lesson to be learned from my mistakes. I began to experiment with different activities. I attended painting workshops, participated in poetic evenings where every heartfelt word became a symbol of inner liberation. In creativity, I discovered a way to express what words alone could not capture. The profound pain of betrayal and the miraculous strength that arose when that pain gave way to acceptance. My reflections increasingly turned to the idea that even within the most agonizing experiences, there exists a seed of wisdom. I started reading books on psychology and philosophy, searching for answers to the questions that had tormented me from the moment Lana left my life. How can one forgive? How can one forget? How can the heart learn to love again? Every new idea, every fresh perspective I encountered helped me shape my own worldview. A worldview built on the realization that the past is but a chapter of our experience, and the future belongs to those who learn from their mistakes and move forward. In one rainy evening, as heavy clouds cloaked the sky, I ventured to the edge of a small pond in the park. Sitting on a wet bench, I simply watched the raindrops create intricate patterns on the water's surface, as if tiny stories were being born from the eternal cycle of change. I mused on how nature could be both gentle and relentless, much like human emotions which can burn with searing pain or offer soothing warmth. In that moment, it struck me that every whisper of wind and every patter of rain carried a message. Life continues, despite every obstacle and trial. Returning home, I felt a renewed strength and a firm resolve not merely to endure the pain, but to transform it into a source of inspiration. I immersed myself once again in creativity, writing poems and short stories that mirrored my inner turmoil. This creative pursuit became not only an outlet for my emotions, but also a method of self-discovery, as each word and metaphor carved from deep within helped me realize that pain is not always a death knell. Sometimes it is simply a state that, once past, paves the way for renewal and growth. Over time, I noticed that the world around me was changing too. Familiar faces that once seemed distant now appeared warmer, and as people shared their stories of triumphs and defeats, each encounter became a small revelation that life is multifaceted and, despite its injustices, astonishingly beautiful. I understood that it was in those moments, when the pain of betrayal yielded to understanding, when the fear of the future gave way to determination, that I began to reclaim my trust in people and in my own future. The sixth part of my journey became a turning point. A moment when I finally learned to cherish every passing minute, to embrace the joy of life despite all the losses, and to understand that true healing comes when you let go of the past and boldly step into each new day. I would watch the twinkling city lights at night and feel deep within that a new dawn was on the horizon, a dawn in which pain would recede, replaced by hope, and betrayal would become the fuel for personal growth. This chapter was the culmination of transformation, the moment when the darkness of past betrayals finally gave way to the light of self-awareness. And I, having weathered a series of trials, embraced the inner freedom I had long yearned for. Although memories of the past still left a faint trace of sorrow, I no longer allowed them to cloud my vision of the future. A future filled with new encounters, fresh emotions, and endless possibilities for happiness. So in this sixth part of my journey, I realized that every minute of life is a gift, a chance to learn how to love and be loved, a chance to find within yourself the strength to forgive and move forward despite all the scars. I gazed out of my window at the shimmering lights of the sleeping city and felt deep inside that a new dawn awaited me, a new life in which pain would yield to light and betrayal would transform into a stepping stone for personal growth. This part of my story became the culmination of change, a moment when I finally learned to accept my fate, understanding that every new day is an opportunity to be true to oneself, to love and to give love without being shackled by past mistakes. And so, sitting quietly in my cozy little corner, I closed my diary, feeling that the last lines of that chapter were a bridge to a new beginning. Every word, every thought was imbued with the realization that life continues despite all the trials, and that true freedom is born when you can forgive and let go. My tired eyes suddenly lit up with hope, and I understood that even after the longest, darkest night, a dawn comes that offers warmth and the promise of a new, brighter life. Thus continued my journey, a journey to find myself, to heal my soul, where every new encounter and every moment of joy was a step along the road to true freedom and harmony. This sixth part of my story stood as proof that despite all the hardships, one is capable of renewal, of loving and believing in a better future, if only one dares to embrace one's pain and transform it into strength for what lies ahead.